our department in 2018 and was the guest speaker. Her topic was Reading is Fatal. In fact, she enlightened the students on the importance of reading and especially the book club that we have helped us uh, enlighten the students regarding the book club and the importance of reading. Now, today we have with us as participants uh, teachers, students from various institutions all over the country. Now, from Kerala, we have from government colleges, aided colleges, autonomous institutions, private universities, and from even the north, Christ University from Karnataka, Ghaziabad. So I have one wish to all of you participants. Fatima Mother National College would like to collaborate on academic matters with institutions from where you come from. So this is an open invite to all of you to communicate this to your management and get back to us. Now, the conduct of any program is a great task. I would like to thank all my colleagues of the department for their wholehearted cooperation for the same. The PG and Research Department of Fatima Mother National College, Autonomous, is on a path of progress, and such international ventures strengthen our institution. I deem it my privilege to declare the International Conference on Emerging Trends in English Literature and ELT open. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia ma'am. Next, I humbly invite Reverend Father Vinod Celestin, Assistant Professor, Department of English, for the benedictory address.
Dr. Pavadi Bhushanan, the most important figure of the two-day program, Emerging Trends in English Literature, ELT. Reverend Father Anil Jose, the chairman of this program and the manager of our college. Reverend Father Abhilash Gregory, the pro-manager of the college. Vincent Sir, the coordinator of this conference and the principal of our college. Cynthia ma'am, the organizing secretary of this conference and the head of the Department of English. Pavadi ma'am, president of this program. Mercy ma'am and Jaya ma'am, the conveners of this program. Supriya ma'am, the moderator of the technical sessions. Respected members of the Department of English, the eminent scholars who are ready with their presentations, and all dear participants. A very good morning to all of you. I'm assigned to the task of delivering a benedictory address. I'm sure I'm not worthy of doing it. And so I'm here to be blessed by all of you, especially through this two-day program. I've always believed that literature shapes our life. Literature has indeed shaped my life. And so instead of a benedictory address, I think I have to share with you an experience which I've had over the years. Let me go back some 10 years and then share with you a story which a retreat preacher during one of our annual retreats shared with all of us. The story was this. In fact, it is a question put in the shape of a story. Maybe the story might take 2 or 3 minutes for me to present before all of you. The story is like there was a person who was in very much love with animals, and especially he loved goats, G-O-A-T-S. And so it was his desire that he buys a goat and rear it, for which he needed some money. And one day it was possible for him to collect some 500 rupees and get hold of a goat. And after he got hold of a goat, it was a very happy life for him because it was his earnest desire that he gets one and then rear it. But immediately after he got this goat, there was a call up from elsewhere, maybe from the town, town and so on, that he got a job. So he had to sell the goat and then go for the job to the town. And when he went to sell the goat, in fact, he got 600 rupees. So 100 rupees extra. And before he could join the profession or join the job, there was a news that he is disqualified for the job. So he had to come back to the village where he was living in. And when he came back, again, his desire is to buy back that goat. And when he was now in the market to buy back the goat from the same person to whom he sold, he got 700 rupees. So, I mean, he had to spend some 700 rupees in order to get it back. So afterwards, again, he got a call from the same company saying his job is now ready. So he sold it now for 800 rupees. I think I got a little confused about the story that I'm sharing with all of you. Maybe I shall repeat. Yeah. He bought the goat for 500 rupees. He sold it for 600 rupees. And he bought it back for 700 rupees. And then he sold it for 700 rupees. And then he had another, he had to buy it back for 800 rupees. So after all the transaction that has been done, whether it is possible, whether it is profitable for him or a loss for him, that is a question that was asked to each one of us. Initially, he bought it for 500 rupees. He sold it again for 600 rupees. He bought it back for 700 rupees. He sold it again for 800 rupees. So in the transaction, is it profitable or is it a loss for him? That was a question that was raised to all of us. And yeah, using elementary mathematics, we could arrive at some answers. And some people said it is a profit of 200 rupees, while some others said it is a loss. Some people said it is a profit of 100 rupees, etc. There were so many different answers. And to each answer, the retired preacher said, you're all right. Because while somebody went with elementary mathematics to decide the answer, other people went with a little bit of commerce, maybe applying some GST. And some people went with the aspect of love and said there is no profit nor loss. And some people even said, no, I had to buy some edibles for the cow. So there was some expense for that as well. So my answer is slightly different. So there were so many different kinds of answers. It all points to the fact that there are many interpretations. There is no one truth. And this was an eye-opener for me personally for that at that time. And I'm sure we will all have this as an eye-openers, because we might think there is one point which is true and which might tempt us into believing that others are wrong. But there are so many truths that are possible. There are so many interpretations that are possible. Literature helps us become more broad-minded, more understanding, etc. So even as I made a mistake of, telling you, recounting the short story, I'm sure you will understand my situation much better. So that is because you're all broad-minded, because literature shapes us, shapes our life. It keeps on adding a lot of perspectives to our life. So I hope this seminar on emerging trends in English literature and ELT will definitely become more understanding, more broad-minded, and more respectful towards others, etc. And we are all eagerly waiting to listen to our resource person, Dr. Parvati Bhushanan. I'm sure all of us will get enriched by her wisdom. So I wish all of you the very best, and I hope that this 2-day seminar be a very successful one. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father, for your enlightening thoughts and wonderful story. Next, I cordially invite Dr. Parvati S., Associate Professor, Department of English and Dean of Arts, for the Presidential Address.
Respected Head of the Department and Organizing Secretary of the Conference, Dr. Cynthia Catherine Michael. Our resource person for today, Dr. Parvati Bhushanan, Reverend Father Abhilash Grigoria, Pro Manager, Father Vinod Celestin, Assistant Professor of our department, Dr. Mercy Famila, convener of the virtual conference, Ms. Jaya Sunny, co-convener, and my dear participants. We are immensely proud and delighted that the Department of English, Fatima Mother National College, is organizing a 2-day international conference on the emerging trends in English literature and ELT. At the outset, let me congratulate the head of the department, Dr. Cynthia Catherine Michael, who has taken up the lead in this venture as organizing secretary. The webinar has materialized thanks to the sincere efforts of Dr. Mercy, Ms. Jaya Sunny, and Dr. Maria Lisa. It was 2 days back that Dr. Cynthia Michael, our HOD, asked me to deliver the presidential address at this inaugural function. Though hesitant in the beginning, I took it up with delight, as my friend Dr. Parvati Bhushanan from US was the resource person, and it was indeed a rare opportunity to share a platform with her. A cordial welcome to you, Parvati, from me,
Thank you.
your
Thank
namesake.
you. Thank you.
The recent trends such as the e-book technology, digital media, blogging, and other forms of social networking play a significant role in English literature today. The primary aspect of English literature that the modern media affects is how modern scholars perceive literature and how they study literature. Recent trends are useful in promoting the exchange of ideas and access to vital information that assist the analysis of literary works. Ebooks and other digital forms of written literature are known to foster interest in reading. Let's now look at a few features of contemporary literature. The people of this generation are always in search of creating new meaning. They reject the authorities of the past and look for new structures and models for viewing the world. This can be seen in literature in a number of areas, such as nonlinear plots, stream of consciousness writing, deconstructionist criticism, experimentation with grammar, laws of dialogue tags, plots that do not resolve, and so on. And as a natural result of this experimentation, mixed genre or hybrid genre has gained popularity. For example, there are writers who make use of literary journalism, which removes the cold objectivity of standard journalism and allows writers to use fictional techniques and poetic language. These days, we come across lyric essays which explore a theme in a somewhat poetic, disjointed, scene by scene fashion, braiding or weaving all the ideas together. Writers are able to include poetry, personal stories, short stories, essays, devotional, scriptures, weaving them all together into a unified collection. Since the postmodern reader rejects traditional authority and absolute truth, they tend to distrust an authoritative voice as well. In non-fiction, because we no longer believe that true objectivity is possible, this leads to books full of anecdotes and personal stories to illustrate the logical points. In fiction, the omniscient narrator has fallen out of favor. The most popular point of view is now the multiple third person, which allows us to see the world up close and personal from a number of perspectives and lets us to draw our own meaning from the experiences of the characters. And as we know, contemporary literature is affected by both postmodern philosophy and a film and television oriented culture. We need a lot of sensory stimulation in our books to compete with visual media. So, more than ever, our words have to draw our readers into the story, bringing them all the way into our characters so that they can see, hear, taste, touch, and smell what our characters are experiencing. However, we can still see the effect of postmodernism because we want to have a relationship with characters and draw meaning from their experiences rather than just have those experiences reported to us. Even in schools and colleges, children are being taught in a multimedia way. We have ICT enabled classrooms that provide audio visual effects to the material taught. And this shift in our culture is going to continue to change our thinking and learning styles. Sheer logic is no longer the rule of the day, and which is why intuition, experience, relationship, and image have become so important to our younger generation. And this is an age of television and film. We have become used to scenes set in one time and place, a quick switch of the camera, and we accept that we are in a new time and place, which is the next significant time and place in the storyline. We don't need an explanation about how we got there or what happened in between. We don't question if the writers and directors have left out some significant information that we need to know. But again, this also relates to the postmodern mindset because we want to draw our own conclusions and don't want everything explained to us from an authoritative point of view. Now, let me move over to one of the latest concerns of contemporary literature, post humanism, which represents predicted future stages of human evolution. It is predicted that technology will eventually merge with human consciousness, resulting in a kind of immortal being whose existence or consciousness transcends the depth of the human body by existing as information within a computer network. The singularity hypothesis that is credited to Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil is an American inventor and futurist, and he has written books on health, artificial intelligence, AI, transhumanism, the technological singularity, and he proposes that the exponential advancement in technology we are presently experiencing will eventually lead to the invention of artificial superintelligence, which will in turn abruptly trigger even faster technological growth, resulting in unfathomable changes to human civilization. This is in fact appalling. As a result, unless humans can process information at the same rate as the technology of the time, we will be left behind to dwell as second class citizens in a world where the technology we developed and once controlled is now independent of our will. Unless we can process information as fast as the machines, we will be left behind. Under these conditions, our only option will be to upgrade our consciousness and capabilities using technology. This will lead to an intermediary transhumanist phase in which man will begin the transition to machine. It will be characterized by the increased integration of technology into our bodies, example, through computer chips. The idea that humanity can be transformed, transcended, or eliminated either by technological advances or the evolutionary process that is artistic, scientific, or philosophical practice reflects the belief in post-humanism. Post-human is a concept originating in the fields of science fiction, futurology, contemporary art, and philosophy. That means a person or entity that exists in a state beyond being human. The concept addresses questions of ethics and justice, language and trans-species communication, social systems, and the intellectual aspirations of interdisciplinarity. Posthumanism ascribes its coinage to the postmodern theorist Ehab Hassan in a 1977 article titled Prometheus as Performer Towards a Posthumanist Culture. The ideas destabilizing the anthropocentric world discussed in the theory of posthumanism featured in Donna J. Haraway's 1985 essay, A Cyborg Manifesto, presents how the focal eye shifts from humanism. Actually, a cyborg is a portmanteau of cybernetic organism that is being with both organic and biomechatronic body parts. And the term was coined in 1960 by Manfred Lines. And to speak about Catherine Hales, an American postmodern literary critic, most notable for her contribution to the fields of literature and science, she characterized posthumanism in four different ways. One, human beings having bodies is an accident of history and is not essential to life. Two, human beings having consciousness is an evolutionary secondary effect and not of primary importance. And three, the human body is the original prosthesis. Prosthesis, as you know, is an artificial device in order to replace a missing part, especially of the body, and can be replaced and upgraded when the technology becomes available. And last, there are no essential differences between bodily existence and computer simulation, cybernetic mechanism, and biological organism, and robot teleology and human goals. And all of this can be summarized by the word that Mark Poster is an American professor of film and media studies. He coined "Hugh machine," which he defines as an intimate mixing of human and machine that constitutes an interface outside of the subject object binary. And the ideas which I put forward now may seem abstract, and we may think it is completely impossible for anything like this happening until way off in the remote future. And we are here reminded of Stephen Leacock, the Canadian writer and professor who published The Man in Asbestos, one in a collection of stories he called nonsense novels. And in this futurist story, there are observations of human nature which are as refreshing today as when they were written in 1911. Leacock describes a world where the inhabitants are clad in long wearing suits of asbestos, where death has been eliminated, although a person can be broken because of the asbestos he is wearing, and where only a vestigial memory of work remains. Anything requiring effort was accomplished centuries ago. In short, a perfect world. And the character, the man in asbestos, talks about the invention of surgical education. I underline that surgical education, the simple system of opening the side of the skull and engrafting into it a piece of prepared brain. An operation of a few minutes would suffice to let in poetry or foreign languages or history or anything else that one cared to have, instead of the barbarous methods of education through the eyes and ears that which we have today. As chemical food replaced the food intake, they lost prepared brains of philosophy, metaphysics, and so on in what used to be the digestive apparatus. Because of the chemical food, digestive apparatus is no longer in use. And in the story, the world of today, with its roaring machinery, the unceasing toil of its working classes, its strife, its poverty, its war, its cruelty, etc., is not seen. Man conquered nature completely, and human race entered upon an era of peace. And it is unbelievable that this story was written in 1911. We now know that the surgical education he refers to in the story is the implant of microchips in the human body that we see today. And now back to posthumanism. Primarily, posthumanism tries to separate different bits of what we would normally call human, divide things which until recently have been so closely knit together and intertwined that most people wouldn't have even considered that they could be separated. What would a human being be without a body? Why would posthumanism want to make this distinction? It seems slightly peculiar as it is completely impossible. Hales and others are looking forward to a world when computer technology has got so good that we can use the technology to change, manipulate, and enhance our human bodies. Enter a world which currently feels like complete sci fi fantasy. And just think about computer technology in our brain, which makes Googling something as quick as remembering it, and maybe making it impossible for the users to tell the difference between the human brain and the computer brain. So we mix up both the human brain and the computer brain while Googling. And what Catherine Hales and other philosophers like her are trying to argue for is an understanding of human, which allows for these technological supplements and enhancement. And the focal point of posthumanism consists not as such in an acritical acceptance of the technological promises, but in a total contamination and hybridization of human beings with other living beings and machines. And these are the two main forms of contamination. The change of perspective taken by posthumanism would be thus a paradigmatic shift in anthropology. Posthumanism, in order to obtain total contamination and man's openness to otherness, proposes the elimination and fluidification of boundaries, thus even denying man's identity and with it the very possibility of openness. And I think The idea of AI, artificial intelligence takeover, became a reality when the Saudi Arabian government gave the robot Sophia citizenship, making it the first non-human entity to gain a national identity. We have robot restaurants in Chennai, Bangalore, and even Kochi in Kerala. An upsurge of virtual reality headsets and data gloves. A data glove is an interactive device, you might know that, resembling a glove worn on the hand, which facilitates tactile sensing and fine motion control in robotics and virtual reality. That made us realize the fact that we humans are, in a way, transforming, an instance of the experiencer turning into a cyborg. And let me sum up. Human societies reorganize both the surrounding environment and themselves. As a result, society is becoming more and more artificial. The driving force behind this process is constantly renewing technologies that are developed to increase welfare. Technology has moved from the reorganization of the physical environment to man's biological body and consciousness. Now, I have identified certain primary sources on which further research on this topic can be done. I'll share that with you. Fledging, 2005, a novel by Octavia E. Butler, American science fiction author. Then another book, Natural History, published in 2003 by Justina Robson. She is a science fiction author from England. And there are movies like Transcendence, 2014, directed by Wally Fisher, and The Matrix, 1999 movie, and both American movies. The hybrid protagonist in these works can be probed to bring to light the evolution of the human other as a cohabitant of the human race. Somebody can do further research on this area, in this area. And with this, I conclude. Thank you all for patiently listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your very informative and highly relevant talk where you touched all the new literary theories like posthumanism. Today, I feel really honored to invite our chief guest, Dr. Parvati Bhushanan, Associate Professor of Callan Community College, USA. She'll be doing a talk on multicultural American voices, the surge of resilience and belonging. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. First, it is my pleasure to be here today, and I'm honored by your invitation. I have to address all the dignitaries present, so let me do that first. Do I have time to kind of stand up, lift my table? Do you have a time schedule? Somebody? I think this might be a better way to talk to you.
Yes, ma'am.
If you have any comments, please feel free to interrupt me.
Yes, yes, Parvati.
Can you see me better now?
Pardon?
Can you see me better?
Yeah,
Okay. Is there enough light?
yes, there's enough of light. Yes.
Okay. So good morning to you all, and it was very interesting to listening to all of you speakers. I enjoyed everybody's address very much. I was greatly informed by Dr. Parvati's speech because she gave so much information about how the future is going to be for the human race. And I'm so glad I'm not going to be there, because I can't imagine living with a chip in my head and so on. Half the fun of life will be gone, I think, in the future. I hope you agree with me, Parvati. Now, I hope this is going to be an address where you can talk to me at least at some point. I will want to share my screen. I hope that has been enabled. Screen sharing for me, I hope that has been enabled. Yes, thank you so much. So I thought I would start with a light note on a very light vein. Last week we had some snow. It was unexpected. It was 5 to 6 inches. It was quite thick. And I thought I would share this brief video. And this is what it was like in the morning. But it was nothing like the deluge of snow that came to Austin and to Texas, from which the people are still suffering. So my presentation is entitled Multicultural American Voices, the Surge of Resilience and Belonging. This presentation explores the writings of 3 minority groups of the United States to understand their role in representing the American strength and identity. I answer questions such as, what is multicultural writing? How did these writings come about? Why is there a surge in these writings? How does literature express resilience and belonging? To this end, I shall discuss representative writings from these 3 groups of marginalized communities and expatiate on the value of literature as a tool to increase awareness and encourage introspection. The 3 communities in question are African American, Latinx, and Native American. There's a reason I have chosen just these 3. And I do hope you will write down questions as they may occur to you as I speak, so that we can have an engaging discussion at the end of my presentation. Let's take a look at the next slide. Visualizing America's population by race. When you look at this, excuse me, you can see that the majority population is at 60% and it is white. Next comes the Hispanic population or the Latinx population. They're at 19%. The Black population is a mere 12.2 or 13%. And just look at the Native American population, it is even below 1%. By the year 2042, the majority population is going to lose that position. Looking at these facts and figures, it is easy for you to understand why there is a power struggle going on in the nation right now. Ideally, the politics of a nation reflects the ambitions and objectives of its citizens. Politics is the engine for social change, and people form the driving force of that engine, and literature is merely a spin-off of the aspirations of the people. The United States is a relatively young nation that is grappling with the question of molding and remolding or unmolding its goals and objectives. And all the multiple populations within the US need to assert themselves. The hyphenated minorities, that's what I just listed for you: Latin American or Hispanic American, African American, and Native American. The Pledge of Allegiance to the national flag is recited every day in every school, and it's a pledge that promises liberty and justice to all. the hyphenated minorities also take these oaths. But in reality, each of them might wonder, can I be American and recognize my ancestral land? Or will that make me disloyal? Is there a conflict of interest in my allegiance to my dual identity? However, in 1995, there was a Supreme Court ruling that said that there is only one kind of American, and he is American. There is no question of any differences in races. But we see a great sign of discrimination against the minorities with the continuous rise of violence against minority communities, which goes against the percentage of their demographic. Multicultural writings or non-canonical writings have diverse groups, and the number of publications are increasing. So what is the state of publishing right now? How many books are being published? About 50,000 novels are published every year in the US and 200,000 worldwide. In the US alone, 4 million books were published in 2019. This is according to data provided by ProQuest, a US-based data information company. So what is multicultural writing? And why do they exist? So multiple cultures coexist with the majority Caucasian culture. The minoritarian writings are a response to the experiences of living in America. These writings express and show us race, equity, and social justice. They show us that they are second-class citizens here. So such an amplification of minority writings helps us understand the problems. Multiculturalism pulls back the curtains on the recolonization of the enslaved or the colonized. Minoritarian writings also shows the bounty of talent of the different groups of people living in America. It engenders awareness of cultures or conflict and the need for resolution. While the argument that minority literature is also victim literature, it has to be remembered that victim literature is didactic. And while each of the writers have achieved personal success, it has come at the cost of much pain and anguish to the community. So how can multicultural writings challenge the hierarchy of the nation? First, everybody accepts that writing and reading literature creates empathy. Next, multicultural writings challenge the master narrative. Now, what is a master narrative? A master narrative is a narrative that places people in neat groups. These writings have a fixed order and does not give complete justice to all the peoples of a nation. Now, multicultural writings provide an alternative to this. The alternative is still quintessentially American. So whether there's a master narrative or an alternative to a master narrative, the American identity was always hybridized. As an example of master narratives, one, the idea of an American dream where through hard work, a person is able to achieve success is something that is not true for everybody. The next master narrative is the idea that an American is essentially Caucasian. This too is challenged by these writings. Nevertheless, it has to be brought to note that the American identity was always hybridized. This is very innate to America, the idea of an American. There was always positive and negative discrimination against immigrants. In the early days, when the nation was almost completely Caucasian, there was discrimination against Europeans from the South and from the East. In 1965, with the passage of the Immigration Act, the legislature chose to end such discrimination. So even within the canonical writings, there was characteristically a discrimination. The idea of an absolute unity is being disrupted every day by practical human conditions. The power of a democracy is the movement of ideas from people to media and the movement of ideas from people to politics. The different wings of the media help reassert human longing for correction and change. The democracy of America recognizes that Americans are no longer monolithic. The idea of a melting pot where all the races mix and mingle and become one, not literally, but in the composition of the idea of an American, is no longer valid. Gone are those days, so now it is a question of pastiche, cultural pastiche, a tossed salad, or a fondue. The diverse voices show us a cultural hybridity, leading to a longing for tradition and for the past. Global society has been linked by industrial capitalism, but divided by religion and politics. Literature is a connecting and an intermediary force. The dual identity is more evident and more accepted than ever before. So why is the multicultural surge possible? How is this possible? The unshackling, as I said just a minute ago about the tight immigration laws in 1965, made a huge difference. The public school system of education, the excellent opportunities for need-based higher education are all reasons why the surge came about. What are the representative books of this surge? All of these books that I'm about to present to you are intrinsic, have great intrinsic value and artistic qualities. I have chosen creative fiction and narrative nonfiction. These books display the American identity, and these books tell us quite emphatically, you cannot send me to the kitchen table. I too need a seat at the dining table. For a long time, and this is nothing new, there have been multiple voices in American history and in the American public space. So we will look at an interesting example of Chinese poetry carved on the walls of Angel Island immigration. You can look at the speeches by Native Americans made to government officials. We can look at 19th century female writers. So there were always the diversity in the past, but as I said, the surge is happening now. So here is the first book that I have chosen and the first community that I'm going to discuss. The first group is African American. And let me just go back to the previous slide. So there are a few choices that these communities have made in order to become successful. The first is the step to take and earn an education, which is seen as the essence of American opportunity for the treasure that no thief could touch, not even misfortune or poverty. So almost all of the writers here represent this. The second survival mechanism is a bit unconventional, but it has happened. So there are several social and literary examples of this. Persons of color would go incognito in white society. It is called passing. Now, how is this possible, you may ask? In the United States, there was a rule called the one-drop rule that deemed that a person who is African American, a person is African American if he or she has one drop of black blood. This was the method by which second-class citizens were created deliberately in the United States. But it became possible for light-skinned African Americans to pass off as white, and there are people who have taken advantage of this ultimate betrayal. I do have a list of a name of a book which does this for us in 2020, creative fiction, of course. The third method is more straightforward, more popular, is to tackle the situation directly by fighting for dignity and recognition of the problems that are faced by the community. So the books I have chosen are aesthetic, social, political, and are outstanding in the larger firmament of American literature. African American literature is closest to mainstream American literature because it entered the arena before all else. Nascent African American literature was slave narratives, but in recent years, the resistance to systematic racism, science fiction, presidential memoirs have all made it to the themes. I have to mention Octavia Butler, whom Dr. Parvati mentioned. She is a very famous science fiction writer, and she is African American. There are too many writers who scintillate before us in a never-ending array. From this group, I have chosen just a few. And that is my caveat for this minuscule representation. The writers are Isabel Wilkerson, Yaa Gyasi, Michelle and Barack Obama, and Brian Stevenson, and Britt Bennett. So you must have all heard about this book, Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel Wilkerson. It is in the genre called narrative nonfiction, and this book compares three nations, caste systems of three nations, United States, India, and Germany. Wilkerson describes the structure by collating the systems in the three nations. And she created her own list called the 8 Pillars of the Caste System. She also uses the analogy of the owner of an old home that stands on a beautiful land to describe what is happening in America today. She says that caste system is the unseen skeleton, and the skin is the racism that we see. The color of your skin determines how you are treated. Now in India, you won't be so unfamiliar with that, will you? One of the interesting anecdotes that she describes here in this book is Martin Luther King's visit to Trivandrum. When he visited Trivandrum, he was taken to a school with Dalit students, and the principal introduced Martin Luther King as a fellow untouchable from the US. Martin Luther King was taken aback, shocked, and annoyed by that introduction. However, he gave it some thought and realized that there was truth to that statement. He was indeed an untouchable in the United States. My professor, the late Professor Ravindranathan, always used to say when discussing caste system that it was a form of petrified violence. I have never come across a pithier and more accurate definition. And if you look at the violence against Black people in the US in particular, this definition sticks. Caste by Wilkerson is a brilliant work by the Pulitzer Prize-winning author. and one that questions the failure of the American system. And it ends with a beautiful, nicely chiseled statement: a world without caste will set the whole world free. Meanwhile, Barack and Michelle Obama have both published 2 bestsellers that detail the cracks and crevices of their journey. Since they're so well known, I will not dwell on their works. Becoming by Michelle Obama and The Promised Land by Barack Obama. Now, this is my favorite writer. She is a native of Huntsville. Well, I say she's a native. She grew up in Huntsville, which is the city that I live in. And she studied in a very, very good public school in Huntsville. And her book, Homegoing, is an example of a slave narrative. Homegoing was immensely successful when it came out in 2016 and deals directly with racism in Huntsville, Alabama. So the second book that she published this past year, Transcendent Kingdom, is about a Black girl's longing to feel that she belongs to God and to church, even in the face of acute racism that she was experiencing in her Pentecostal church, where she belonged to the only Black family. Just Mercy is an example of creative nonfiction. It's a story of justice and redemption. It's a story of a public litigation lawyer who has given up his life to help those who are waiting and languishing in the prisons, waiting for justice to come to them, because they don't have the means to employ a lawyer to fight their cause. This book is a bestseller and was also made into a major motion picture. It used to be available in Amazon Prime. I don't think it is available anymore, though. The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett is just making the waves here in the US. It's mightily popular. I have not had the chance to read it. I will be doing so soon, possibly by next week. This story is about the intraracial dynamics of the Black community. It's about the story of 2 sisters, both light-skinned, and how one sister just disappears, passes off as white, and lives far away from her natal family. Latinx literature is the latest trend in that there is such a surge of Latin writing flooding the readers market. They form 19% of the population. And the changes are happening every day in the southern border because their numbers are burgeoning. And it's a story of fright and flight. This is not likely to change until there's a drastic change in the political and economic situation in South America. The first novel that I want to discuss is American Dirt by Janine Cummins. It is a novel that resonates the cultural zeitgeist. It's about social justice or the lack thereof that leads to forced immigration. Migrants are either hated criminals or people to be saved. These are the 2 extreme opposing ends of the spectrum represented by the 2 dominant political parties of the US. So the definition of the illegal immigrant and the need for social justice is something that you can grasp easily when you read this book. So extreme poverty, police corruption, political corruption, and violence cause these mass migrations. Now, this book is very interesting because once you pick it up, you cannot put it down. It follows the round-robin method of narration. It was something that Dr. Parvati mentioned, but she used another literary term for it. Round-robin method of narration is when the different characters, the diverse characters, develop the story. The literary merit of presenting various characters is insignificant compared to the diversity of reasons to flee South America. What is their human story? What precipitates these mass migrations? As I've listed here, it's the poverty, it is the corruption, it's the violence. And there doesn't seem to be a respite from these for the people who have to flee their homes. Cummins uses the framework of a housewife fleeing with her young son to narrate a harrowing tale of life-threatening danger. While the plot is propelled by a dramatic medias res in the beginning with a cinematic event, with an event that is almost cinematic, the process becomes the same as that of an illegal immigrant running away to the United States. Reading this book is like watching a movie, and I'm sure this is going to hit the silver screen soon. The Brief, Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. It's a story of a Dominican immigrant. Junot Díaz is a brilliant writer. And this story is one of infinite possibilities. Oscar Wilde charms with his innocent nerdiness. Now, more than the story itself, this author is a genius. He belonged to an immigrant family. His mother was a menial worker who knows no English. He himself arrived in the United States at the age of 6 and struggled to learn English. His story is one of magical success. Today, he's a professor of writing at MIT. Again, a product of the American educational system. Now, as we come to the last segment, I have to say that the Native American literature is possibly the most difficult to read because it fills you with a sense of sorrow. Native Americans, as you saw from the previous slide, the first slide, form less than 1% of the population and have the slimmest volume of writings. But the two works that I've chosen are both very haunting. So the first writer is Sherman Alexie. He is very well known. And this book, 10 Little Indians, must remind you of another book written by Agatha Christie. It was, the title is very racist. But there's one more nugget of information that I have to share about how badly, how cruelly the Native Americans were treated by the US government. The US government policies shifted over 200 years. And in the 1960s, the government decided to grant the policy of self-determination to Native Americans. But the oppressive dominance of the US never gave them a chance to have full independence. Then this created more problems than you can imagine. So I'll talk about that shortly. Now let's take a look at this book. Why is this book so significant? The title, of course, talks about the racism. So embedded within this racist title is another racist title. The title tells us of the racist history. It is a collection of short stories. This enabled Sherman Alexie to create a versatile group of characters and their varying roles in mainstream society. So the native is still giving, still sacrificing. The Roundhouse by Louis Erdrich is a story that has three themes. So, what is it about? It tells the tale of a rape, of which and how the victim's son, who is 13 years old, wants to seek revenge. Why does he want to do that? Because he cannot trust the local judicial system, not the Native American system, nor the system of the federal government of the US. The service this novel does is to create awareness for a crime that is being perpetrated on Native American women. 1 in 3 Native American women is raped, and 86% of these culprits are non-Native American men who always manage to go scot-free after these crimes. So the first theme is the lack of justice available to Native Americans in their own land. The second theme is of rape and revenge because the law does not bring justice. And the final overarching theme is of the safety of tribal women. So is literature a force for change? That is the question. Literature can be a tool. However, it has to work in conjunction with social and digital media. All peoples of the world seek peace and prosperity. And this can be achieved only through constant striving. So it's almost like the task of Sisyphus, never ending. So what is the purpose of or goal of multicultural writings? Why is there that need? Literature helps provide a source, a primary source to help with change. But today, social and digital media are necessary, are handmaidens, are tools too to help literature find its target. For the past 7 years, I have been teaching online, and I know that as an instructor, we have to teach with multimedia methods in order to reach the maximum number of students. That has become the state of literature too. In order to reach a wider audience, it has to work together with all the digital devices possible. Now, that brings me to the end of my presentation, but I do have a brief video that I would like to show you. It'll last about 3 minutes. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I do hope we can have a discussion now.
Participants, please, if you have any doubts, you can ask now. It's open for discussion.
So let me ask the questions then. Can I call out names? I actually had a question for Dr. Parvati. Are you still there?
I'm here, Parvati.
Oh, okay, okay. So you mentioned the novel Fledgling by Octavia Butler.
Yeah.
I was fascinated by that because Octavia Butler is a very famous novelist here. And I've read her science fiction, yes, and she writes science fiction in a very different way. For example, I read the book Kindred, where you have this time traveling girl who moves from the present to the slavery of antebellum South. It was a fascinating story.
Okay.
And she's an extremely talented writer. And I don't know whether you want to talk about that book, Fledgling, because it is in context to my presentation.
Right now, I'm not prepared to.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Now,
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
This is Bulbul.
Hi, Bulbul.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very
Can
well.
I see you?
I don't know, ma'am, what are the settings like, but
That's okay. All right. Go ahead and ask your question.
ma'am, could you please briefly give us something on the video that you had shown us towards the end of the presentation? What exactly is the import of that video?
Right. I was going to say that. It was not directly connected to my presentation at all, but it was meant to show how diversity is so rampant across the world. We have wealth as well as diversity and disparity. I think that's the word to use. And I wanted to create an awareness of how the world is moving, to see how much we have to work to preserve the earth. So those are the things. I just wanted you to think about that. And though it is not directly connected, it still has some value. Do you have any other specific questions about it? Did you notice anything that you liked or disliked?
No, not exactly, but it triggered my thought processes, if it would be nice if you could share the URL of that from wherever you have, got it, so that we can think more about it and probably, have an exchange with our students or with the colleagues.
Sure.
I found it very intriguing, there's so much to explore in that video.
Right. Yes, this is true. It's very deep. It shows us so much of that so much is different in different parts of the world.
Yes.
For example, looking at it, when I saw that Australia and the islands around it There's such a thin density of population. Made me realize why COVID is maybe one of the reasons. It's not just one factor alone. Why COVID has not affected them as much as it has affected, say, the more populated parts of the world. Of course, it is so horrible in the United States for a number of other reasons as well. I know there was, in the introduction, there were some concerns about, some concerns expressed about the COVID and its impact. But then, go on. Someone said something?
No, ma'am, I think there is some talk going on amongst the people there. Yes, ma'am, please continue.
So there was talk about how COVID has disrupted our lives. And today in the papers, I was reading that in India, it's almost, the effect is almost gone. People are not bothered by it anymore. Life is slowly getting back, or quickly getting back to normal. It's not the case in Europe, and certainly not the case in America, though the rise in infections has gone down. But I must say that there was prediction that this would happen a long time ago, that zoonotics will become rampant. And I don't know what that means for the future, but it certainly is a risky world until, we all become robotic. Then maybe it won't be so bad. Yeah, Parvati?
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So I will share that URL with you. Either I will send it to the department. Is that good?
Yes, ma'am. They can share it with us via a WhatsApp group or something.
Okay. All right.
Ma'am, could we have your email address also, please?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will send it. I will send a message to the department. I have the department email. Is that good?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. I think they can convey it to us then.
Yeah, I can send it.
Ma'am, like when you are talking of marginalization, there are so many other ways, there are so many other sectors, or I mean the like parts of the society that are marginalized. And I feel, truly for these people. And ma'am, presently I'm working on the, in the area of transgender studies, which is quite a neglected and ignored subject here in India. And for this purposes, I've recently got a fellowship to study at the University of Edinburgh, Scotland. So I would be very soon moving there. So marginalization, I think, is a very pertinent issue that needs to be addressed in many, many levels now.
Right.
Whether it pertains to racism or classism or gender, on the front of gender, there's so much to be done on this front.
That's true. You're absolutely right. And I don't know if you guys will think that America is in the forefront of that movement. But let me set that aside for a few minutes and talk about minority communities in the US. I'm sure some of you must have wondered why I did not touch upon the other minorities in the US. I see there's a question that's popped up. I will come to that too. Now, I was very deliberate in not choosing the model minority. The model minority are the Asians who are highly successful in the United States. They may be 6% of the population, but their median income is very high, much higher than the national median income. And they are an eminently successful group of people. And hence, I do not wish to bring them into the dialogue, because it was important to see how marginalized people, minorities who are suffering, who have been relegated to the back burner, are trying hard to rise to the surface. Now, transgender rights are all constantly being discussed, and these positions of they've become very hot topics for politicians. Now I see a question here. let me read that. How will America regain itself from the recent polarizing events caused due to Black Lives Matter, also from the which can can systemic violence towards minorities be eroded through literature, and can publication houses help in that matter of representation? Yes, it's not Black Lives Matter alone that is causing polarizing events. In fact, I would say it is my observation that the African American minority, which is just 12% of the population, have faced the brunt of violence from society and are reacting. That doesn't mean one has to condone violence, but there is also the rise of white supremacy, which is something that has to be, which is something that will deteriorate further. When you look at that first slide that I showed you, and I showed you the percentage of distribution by race. Now, pandemic, which has become politicized, things are getting much better now. And that is because it's just turned the corner. Vaccinations have started. About 50 million vaccinations have been given. So we have to see how that goes. New variants of the disease are being found, and that's a problem too. But I think the vaccinations promise to protect from the variants as well. Now, can systemic violence be eroded through literature? No, probably not. But through political action, yes. But literature creates awareness. It's a primary source of information because other media, podcasts, social media, all of it can be generated only through the written word. Even though you may not want to read, the person who creates these podcasts even have to be readers and writers themselves. So I don't think reading and writing will go away. In fact, those who read and write will have the ability to harness great power and influence. And which is why we teachers exist, to urge you to not give up on these skills, because everybody has to be capable enough to tackle misinformation or disinformation, as the case may be. So in order to be able to do that, we have to keep reading. I didn't understand the second part of that question. Can publication houses help in that matter of representation? I'm not sure I understand that. So if you could clarify that for me. I think it is from Tanya Alphonse. So if you could explain that question to me, I can try to answer that. Anything else?
No.
And then
Tanya, can you please explain that question?
So while I wait for that, let me address this transgender question. Don't you think in India, I'm addressing Bulbul, don't you think in India there is a certain amount of tolerance and acceptance of transgender people? Or am I just, yeah,
No, ma'am.
sorry.
No,
Go on.
no. As far as my, as I'm still in the process of research, and I'm sorry to say that, ma'am, there are only, let us say, very, very, very few people, who reach certain levels. They're not even given the right to, a dignified way of earning their living. Ma'am, their condition is pathetic, ma'am. You cannot imagine. They are either, they have only two ways of living, either begging or prostitution. And both, bring so much of insult, humiliation, torture, torment to them that it is really a very sorry state of affairs. We know, ma'am, very recently there have been certain, movements like, asking these people to join certain, they would be given jobs in the metro stations or somewhere like this. But this is a very, very, ma'am, recent this thing, and very small way of helping them. Otherwise, ma'am, what I truly feel from within, these are the people who are suffering for no fault of theirs. I mean, when there are a lot many autobiographies of these renowned trans people of our country. And each one of them, in their autobiography, somewhere or the other have said, why am I being punished? What did I do wrong? I was made, like this by nature.
Have you read the book, The Burning Train?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. The Burning Train.
Yeah, it's a very famous book, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. So these autobiographies, tell us a lot about though, there are only very few trans people, like one who's become, maybe she has won a pageant, a beauty pageant, another one who's some officer. But these are very few, we can count them on tips. Otherwise, if we, take a general look at these people, it is very sad, sorry state of affairs, ma'am. So that is my... Ma'am, even in the curriculum of India, nowhere in any of the universities I found, there is, even a section of, syllabus that is devoted to, reading these people. Because unless and until you read, how will you come to know about these people?
Yeah, empathy cannot be created, right?
Hello, ma'am.
And surprisingly, ma'am, what I found that in the countries abroad, we have special transgender institutes. So that is where we are.
But then in the United States, there's great backlash for government spending on these matters.
That is evident. Nobody is going to really take it as a welcome move. But still, we need to incorporate it in our curriculum very soon.
Yeah, nobody cares about a minor percentage of the population.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. My name is Tanya, and I asked a question, how will America regain itself? What I wanted to convey by the second part of the question is that the majority being 60% Caucasian, how will the publication house, equalize the amount of Hispanic, Black, and Native voices into the whole publication sphere?
Well, that is why minoritarian writing is minimum compared to the writings of the majority population. There's no doubt about it. That's why you have a whole main canon of Caucasian writing, and then you have a very minor group. But the number I gave you, about 4 million, is itself a staggering amount, don't you think? But that includes everything. There are self-published books also in that category. So I don't know how.
How will they equalize it? Because how will they?
What do you mean by equalize? So you're saying if 100 people, do they choose to publish some books?
Yes, by giving merit to also the style of writing as well as the story which they are trying to convey.
Yeah. Obviously, in the United States, it's not so difficult to publish. Don't you think? The staggering number. The publishing industry itself is overworked. And I don't think they have a proportion like that. But there will certainly be popular writers who have to work hard to find someone to publish them. And I know that you have to approach many people before that can work. And this young girl who published from Huntsville, Ya Gyasi, at the age of 26, or even the author Britt Bennett, she's also widely published, very young and widely published. I have no idea how such things happen. But I think it is by merit that it can happen.
Thank you so much.
I hope that answers your question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
But the main canon of writing is still the Caucasian canon. what you call American mainstream literature.
So thank you all participants for making this session interesting. And thank you so much, Parvati ma'am, for touching all the crucial issues that mankind face today. As she mentioned, a world without caste system is set to free, would liberate all of us from pricking issues. We hope that only literature can offer consolation. Finally, I invite Ms. Jana Sunny, Assistant Professor, Department of English, and co-convener of the conference for the vote of thanks.
A very good morning to all gathered here. I am indeed privileged to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of the Department of English of FMNC. For no event can be a success without the collective efforts of a dedicated team, and no duty is more pressing than that of expressing gratitude. At the outset, I should like to express our gratitude to our beloved manager, Reverend Father Anil Jose, for his unflinching support in this venture. We are also greatly indebted to our ever dynamic pro manager, Reverend Father Abhilash Gregory, for his consistent encouragement and support. I also acknowledge our gratitude to our principal, Dr. Vincent B. Netto, who is a perennial source of inspiration for us. Next, I should like to place on record our indebtedness to our chief guest, Dr. Parvati Bhushanan, for gracing the occasion with her invaluable presence and for giving us that enlightening talk in which she highlighted the value of literature as a tool to increase introspection. I acknowledge the priceless commitment of our HOD, Dr. Cynthia Catherine Michael, towards the realization of this webinar and for delivering the inaugural address. Next, I extend my gratitude to Dr. Parvatias for all her support and for delivering such an insightful presidential address. I should also like to express my gratitude to Reverend Father Vinod for his dedicated efforts towards this program and for delivering the benedictory address. I also place on record my indebtedness to all my other colleagues in the department, Supriya ma'am, Claire ma'am, Stanley sir, Manoj sir, Christy sir, Sony sir, Tom sir, Maria ma'am, for their unwavering support and concerted efforts. No conference or indeed any program can blossom without a dedicated person willing to walk that extra mile. I here acknowledge the tireless commitment of Dr. Y. Mercy Famila, program convener, towards the realization of this goal. A special word of thanks to Dr. Maria Lisser for her selfless involvement in this venture. Her suggestions and enthusiasm have been priceless. I appreciate the contribution of Ms. Jisha and Mr. Bijoy of the first MA. I also thank all members of the IQAC team, especially Dr. Shaiju and Dr. Sijin, for all technical support extended. Finally, I express our great sense of gratitude to all our students and all the participants for gracing the occasion with their presence and their constructive deliberations. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Parvati, for acquainting us with so many contemporary authors. Thank you so much.
Sorry. Your speech was the one that
Participants, kindly wait for 10 more minutes. The link for filling the Google form is open now. Fill the form to get your e-certificates. We come to the end of session 1. Technical session will start at 11:45. Paper presenters, kindly note, The link for the technical session will be shared in the WhatsApp group. Participants, kindly fill the Google form to get your e-certificates.
Okay, thank you, Parvati. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a wonderful day.
Participants, kindly fill the Google form. Wait for 10 more minutes and fill the Google form, please.